The Sunday school lessons for June 15th, 2025 are Abraham makes an offering and the value of a life. Genesis chapter 22, verses 1 through 14. Welcome, viewers and subscribers, to my channel, The Backstory and More. I am Audrey. If you are new here, please know that this is an audio reading of the lesson with intermittent commentary. Verses 1 through 2. Verse 1. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. The phrase sometime later indicates a certain passage of time, but we do not know how much time. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. Since Isaac is capable of carrying wood, we can assume a passage of several years has occurred since Isaac's birth. God does not tempt anyone to sin. Instead, the idea in this verse is that of proving one's faith through testing. Hebrews 11 and 17 supports this by saying that Abraham was tested. Verse 2. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." This verse refers to Isaac as Abraham's only son. However, Abraham had previously fathered Ishmael through Hagar. In Genesis 21, verses 9 through 12, we learn that Ishmael was not the son of promise. He was the son that resulted from Abraham's seeking to fulfill God's promise of an heir through ancient custom rather than divine provision. God did not, however, reject Ishmael altogether. On account of Abraham, God blessed Ishmael and made a great nation of his offspring. Though God continued to look after Ishmael, he was no longer Abraham's responsibility. There is only one son of promise to Abraham, and that son is Isaac. Therefore, it is most startling to read that God asked Abraham to sacrifice the child of the promise. This request is undoubtedly what Abraham finds most disturbing. God had spoken to Abraham many times, often to reiterate covenant promises to make him into a great nation with countless descendants. The command, "Take your son and sacrifice him there as a burnt offering," seems to threaten those promises. Abraham is not only giving up someone he loves, but also cutting off the only way he sees possible to beget offspring. The law of Moses prohibited human sacrifices. The Old Testament prophets chastised God's people for breaking these commands. But Abraham lived 5 centuries or so before the giving of the law of Moses, and human sacrifice to pagan gods was not unheard of in the ancient Near East world. The only other mention in the Bible of Moriah can be found in 2 Chronicles chapter 3 verse 1. That passage informs us that centuries after Abraham, King Solomon would build a temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. The location where God asked Abraham to offer his son is the same place where the people will later sacrifice their offerings, and very close to where God will offer up his own son, Jesus. Verses 3 through 4. Verse 3. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. We are not told that Abraham said anything in response to God's command. There is no haggling with God, as we see in Genesis chapter 18, verses 22 through 33. Abraham wasted no time carrying out his assignment. His actions speak for themselves as he rose early the next morning to begin the trip. The journey required that two of his servants be brought along. Abraham probably needed their help handling the logistics of food, clothing, bedding, and packed animals required for the trip. This verse reveals Abraham's faithfulness and obedience to God. When God initially called him from Haran, Abraham followed in hopes of receiving the promises. Now, Abraham followed God's lead in full awareness that he might lose his son and thereby the promises of God. Verse 4. On the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. If we assume that Abraham's point of departure is Beersheba, according to Genesis 21:22 through 34, then the trip to Moriah is one of about 50 miles. This 3 day journey gave him plenty of time to get cold feet, devise an excuse, or otherwise maneuver his way out of this terrible assignment. In building such time into this test, God made sure that Abraham's compliance would not be an impulsive act. Abraham's faith was tested in the crucible of time. Verses 5 through 7. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you." Abraham needed the aid of his servants to reach his point, but now he must leave them behind. Abraham's statement, "I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you," injects irony and ambiguity into the narrative. Whether or not Abraham intended to lie, his words will ultimately prove accurate. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 19 offers helpful commentary in stating that Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son because he believed that God could bring him back from the dead. In that case, we can read Abraham's words in the verse before us as proof of his trust in God's promises. Verse 6. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the kindle as the two of them went on together. The narrative, as we have it, provides minimum details. It says nothing about the emotional state of Abraham or Isaac. We know nothing of how Abraham may have felt as he laid the wood for the burnt offering on the back of his son, whose body may soon be consumed. It is noteworthy that Jesus also carried on his back the wood that was his own cross to Golgotha. Verse 7. Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father." "Yes, my son?" Abraham replied, "The fire and the wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" At last we hear from Isaac. This verse indicates that Abraham has not yet told Isaac what is about to happen. Isaac's question is to be expected. He and his father have all the elements for a sacrificial offering except for the sacrificial animal itself. The description of Isaac speaking to his father Abraham by saying "father" may seem unnecessarily at this first glance, but the intent may be to highlight the drama. Using our sanctified imaginations, we might presume an attitude of excitement behind Isaac's question, "Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" as he presumes this to be a special outing, maybe even a feast for just the two of them. On the flip side, we easily imagine a somber tone in Abraham's address of Isaac as "my own." Verses 8 through 9. Verse 8. Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. Excuse me. Some students of the text think that Abraham intended to mislead Isaac to avoid scaring him. A better idea is that Abraham was so convinced by God's provision that he was confident in God's miraculous provision to provide the lamb for the burnt offering. Abraham likely knew that God's promise does not depend on human planning, so he waited expectantly for God to provide. Verse 9. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. The text does not disclose the age of Isaac. While he may have been a child, some later Jewish interpretations of this text believe that Isaac was grown and past the age of 13. The basis for this interpretation is that Isaac willingly submitted to being sacrificed. God's request of Abraham might seem to be less problematic if Isaac himself volunteered to die. The altar Abraham built may be no more than a simple pile of rocks. Excuse me. The wood was laid on top of the rocks, and the offering was on top of the wood. For Abraham to bind his son Isaac may not be a simple matter, however, if the lad resisted, but the text gives no indication that he does. The succinct narration emphasizes Abraham's obedience. He showed commitment to God by completing the procedures to sacrifice his son. Verses 10 through 12. Verse 10. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. No spoken words are recorded, but it's easy to conjecture what is going through the minds of both father and son. The level of Abraham's anguish probably matches the level of Isaac's terror. Only God's intervention can stop things now. Verse 11. Excuse me. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. This verse provides the story's climax, God's intervention through the angel of the Lord. This title is a designation given to God's angelical beings who often relay the words of God. In the verse before us, the angel does not appear to Abraham. Instead, the angel speaks to Abraham from heaven. For the final time in this story, Abraham responds, Here I am, when addressed. Abraham is interrupted just as he is about to carry out the sacrifice commanded of him. The twofold calling of Abraham, Abraham, carries a sense of urgency. The scene is similar to what later occurs at the burning bush with Moses. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to Moses in flames of fire from within a bush. But then God is said to be the one who calls to Moses from the bush. It is clear that the angel represents divine authority. Verse 12. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. The angel ordered Abraham to halt, thus preventing any physical harm to Isaac. The angel reveals the rationale for God's request to test whether Abraham was willing to give up his only son out of obedience to God. These words tell us that Abraham has indeed passed the test. In essence, God asked him, Do you trust me and me alone to fulfill my promises to you? Are you willing to give up all control and place your entire future into my hands? The answer to both questions is a resounding yes. No other feat could demonstrate with such certainty Abraham's faith in God alone to fulfill his promise. Isaac is not merely his only son. Isaac was Abraham's only chance to secure future promises. In raising the knife, Abraham boldly declared his conviction that God is his only hope. With that unspoken confession of faith, he received his son back as though from the dead. We should not misinterpret the phrase, you fear God. God is not glad that Abraham was afraid of him. Instead, fear is another way to express worship. It signifies that Abraham understood that his son and thus his future belonged to God. Abraham's obedience echoes David's later testimony of the Lord, for as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. The will of God was the driving force in Abraham's life. God was with his ultimate motivation. Abraham's actions reveal the heart of true worship. God values obedience over sacrifice. Verses 13 through 14. Verse 13. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. Centuries after Abraham, the law of Moses would prescribe the use of a ram for sacrificial offerings and in ordination proceedings. God did indeed provide for the sacrifice. The ram was not provided when Abraham began his 3 day journey along the journey or at the foot of Mount Moriah. It was provided only after Abraham demonstrated his willingness to go all the way in carrying out God's instructions. Verse 14. So Abraham called that place the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. God faithfully provided for Abraham. As a result, the man names the location, the Lord will provide. Abraham fully understood that the one true God always sees that his people are provided for. It is worth noting that Abraham does not name the place Isaac is spared or a father is relieved. This account has been about God's faithfulness and whether Abraham truly believes that God will keep his promises. Indeed, God is faithful, and Abraham truly believed. Thank you so much for listening. Stay safe and may God bless.